Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar, where we'll be discussing water safety and providing advice for carers and parents. My name is Barry MacMillan, and I'm a watch commander with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. My current role is working within the service's prevention and protection function, and I support the activities of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Water Safety Group. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Glasgow Parents Group for the opportunity to present at this event. Okay, so the aims of tonight's presentation are to give an insight of potential risks and dangers, highlight the effects of cold water shock, give advice on the float to live message, provide some safety advice which will allow you to enjoy the water safely, and information on what to do in an emergency. In Scotland, we're both blessed and cursed with some of the best scenery in the world, with over 30,000 lochs and more than 125,000 kilometres of rivers and a vast coastline. We have an abundance of access to our water. This, coupled with the cold water temperatures, gives us a massive hazard right on our doorstep. Scottish Fire and Rescue want people to enjoy Scotland's waters, but to enjoy it safely. During lockdown restrictions, we have seen an increase in visitors at these locations and a rise in the popularity of water-based recreation activities. These are just some of the recent newspaper headlines that highlight the dangers of Scottish waters and the tragic outcomes. As you can see from these images, drowning can affect people of all ages, swimming abilities, and during various activities. Over 60% of drownings involve people who could swim, which highlights the need for improved safety advice. These shocking figures show the number of deaths in water in Scotland. Over the past 5 years, the number of people dying in Scottish waters is on average 96 people per year. To put this into context, the 10-year average for fire deaths is 44 per year. Statistically, you're twice as likely to drown in Scotland than you are in any other part of the UK. This may be down to our colder climate and our large number of bodies of water. This is a list of some of the hazards which may be present in the water. Fast flowing water, undercurrents, water temperature, which can cause cold water shock, objects in the water, contaminated water, depth of the water, and drop-offs. Of all these, cold water is one of the main factors which contribute to people requiring emergency assistance. The following slide shows aerial pictures taken above Loch Lomond. These show some of the hazards and how they may be hidden. As you can see, the darker areas show areas of deep water. Some of these are changes in depth from around about 3 foot to 30 foot. This will also influence the temperature of the water dramatically. This picture also shows family playing in the water, unaware of the near drop-offs. If the water was removed from these pictures, these families would literally be playing on a cliff edge. Other hidden dangers may also be present, such as undercurrents, objects under the surface that can cause entanglement, such as tree roots. And our advice before going into the water is to stop and think and spot the dangers. I think the majority of people have probably visited Loch Lomond and surrounding areas and possibly been unaware of these pictures. I think they're a great visual on some of the hazards. These are an example of some of the dangerous behaviours that people partake in. From the top left, this image shows the practice of tombstoning, which I'll come to discuss later on. The image to the right of that is also taken from the same location and was posted on social media. It shows a teenage boy who has swum beneath the water to take a selfie in a submerged vehicle. This highlights how the increase in social media use has seen the rise in dangerous activities to gain likes on various platforms. The picture next to us highlights the dangers of playing on ice. This is an activity which is still far too common on Scottish waters during winter. Picture in the bottom left is taken from a bridge in the Highlands of Scotland. The area that the jumper lands in is approximately 2 metres wide with rocks on both sides. This is an area, as you can possibly tell by the accent, I'm originally from the Highlands. and it's an area where I've seen this happening firsthand. The image next to that as well was taken by the fire service whilst visiting a risk within their local area. The child pictured has managed to slip their parents' grip and run towards the water's edge. As you can see, the rocks are very slippery and the child is only feet away from a deep, fast-flowing river, highlighting the need for constant supervision around the waters. We're now going to move on to the cold water shock element. Cold water shock plays a part in many of the drownings in Scottish waters. So anything below 15 degrees Celsius is defined as cold water. The average sea temperature around the UK is 12 degrees Celsius. Cold water shock can cause involuntary gasping that can make the casualty inhale air, panic and drown. Sorry, inhale water, panic and drown. If you survive the initial shock, very quickly your muscles will cool to a point where you find you can no longer swim. As shown in the aerial pictures of Loch Lomond, if you find yourself in deep water at the time of your muscles beginning to fail, this could have fatal consequences. The following video I'm about to show shows Aunt Middleton being submerged in cold water. Things to watch for during this video is the rise in his pulse rate as it almost doubles immediately, putting his heart under stress. You'll also witness how his breathing changes whilst he's being submerged. This is something that he's been taught to control during his time in the military, but he cannot prevent it from happening. There is also a test which he carries out before and after submersion, which demonstrates the effect on his muscles. I believe this is quite a good video for showing cold water and its effects.
It's cold water shock that we're here to look at today, and we're going to give Ant an experience of that particular set of responses.
And if we can just put this on your t-shirt. Yeah.
Great, bang on 30 seconds.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, press.
Well done, Ant. That's it, that's good. Stick with it. How are you?
Yeah, good. All right. Very cold.
12 degrees. You think it's nothing, and then you hit it, and then you realise it's something.
That's taken twice as long. That's 63 seconds. Well done.
If you want to know what to do, research RL&I, respect the water.
I think you'll agree that's quite a good video for showing the effects. Obviously, Aunt Middleton is somebody SBS trained and is used to being in cold water, and I think it highlights that even the most experienced people will be affected by cold water. When around 50% of the people that do drown fall into the water accidentally and no intention of going in the water, it shows you how important having a bit of knowledge about cold water and the following part for Float to Live is. The Float to Live message is a key safety message which can help if you find yourself in difficulty in water. But this message is also vital for the rescuer and can help save a life. So the main points of this is to fight your instinct to thrash around. Lean back, extend your arms and legs. For our young people, this can be the advice to float like a starfish. If you need to, gently move your arms and legs around to help you float. Float until you can control your breathing and only then call for help. Swim to safety or continue floating until help arrives. And the following video from the RNLI will demonstrate this. The Float to Live message can be keen to know if you fall in the water, but it's also vitally important that you have this information if you become a rescuer. By asking somebody to float and to calm the situation down can be the difference between life and death. So this is a vital part to learn.
Everyone who falls into cold water unexpectedly has the same instinct: to swim hard, to fight the cold water. But when people fight it, chances are they lose. Cold water shock makes them gasp uncontrollably and breathe in water. Then they drown. But if they just float until the cold water shock has passed, they'll be able to control their breathing and have a far better chance of staying alive.
So we'll now move on to some of the activities that I discussed earlier on. We're going to discuss tombstoning. Tombstoning is an activity where people will jump from a height into the water below. The name tombstoning comes from the way that the person enters the water like a tombstone. Injuries and deaths caused by tombstoning are a massive problem. This activity often coincides with the end of the school term and finishing of exams. Factors such as alcohol consumption and peer pressure could lead to people making poor decisions. Most of those involved in the most serious cases are males, which made up 85% of injuries with this. Teenagers were involved in just over half the cases. Of the non-fatal incidents, spinal and limb injuries, both at 20%, were most reported. Our advice would be to discuss this activity with your young people, highlight the dangers, discuss cold water shock and the float to live message. Even by just challenging the dangerous behaviours of their friends, your young people can play a part in reducing these incidents happening. Recreation safety tips. Research has proven that wearing a life jacket or buoyancy aid can increase your chance of survival by up to 4 times if you're immersed in cold water. Whatever your activity, wearing a well-fitted, well-maintained and suitable life jacket or buoyancy aid could save your life. Take time to find a style of life jacket that's comfortable to wear and suits your needs. The best life jackets is one that you'll wear. One of the reasons for people to not wear a buoyancy aid is the belief that it will not look cool on their social media posts. This is why it's important to ensure that you purchase one that you will definitely wear. I believe this picture was taken of a family in Loch Lomond. What it does show is that the entire family, I don't know if you can see clearly in the picture there, but the adult that's sitting down is actually carrying a baby in his arms, and nobody's wearing a life jacket there. Hot tubs and ponds. This is a risk which often becomes present when on holiday, but may be present in some households. The advice would be to buy a hot tub with a solid or lockable cover, one that your child can only open with adult help. Make sure your hot tub is covered when not in use. Supervise, always ensure children are supervised when around an open hot tub. Covering your pond is a good option for some. You just need to make sure you use a rigid metal grill rather than the flimsy chicken wire. Another good option, although it can sometimes give you a false sense of security, particularly as most young children are excellent climbers, if you do choose a fence, make sure it's at least 1.1 metre and the access points such as gates are kept locked. There are some great options for transforming your pond into something else while the little ones are young, such as flower beds or even a sandpit. Our advice for carers and parents, supervision is rule number 1. Children must be watched whenever they're around water. This is true whenever the water is in a bathtub, wading pool, ornamental fish pond, swimming pool, a spa, an ocean, a lake. Young children are especially at risk. They can drown in less than 2 inches of water. That means drowning can happen in a sink, a toilet bowl, fountains, buckets, inflatable pools, or small bodies of standing water around your home, such as ditches filled with rainwater. Always watch your children closely when they're in or near any water, no matter what their swimming skills. Even children who know how to swim can be at risk of drowning. For instance, a child could slip and fall on the pool deck, lose consciousness and fall into the pool and possibly drown. Now I'm going to cover what to do in an emergency. So the first thing that we should do is talk. As we said before, talking to the casualty is important. If you talk to the casualty, encourage them to float and to keep calm, get help, call 999, or ask somebody if there's somebody else there to go and call 999. Reach, use a long object or similar you may not be able to reach. Do not go into the water yourself. Throw, look for rescue equipment such as a throw line or life ring and use this to rescue the casualty. The action of getting a casualty to float could be enough to keep that person alive. It's vitally important that the rescuer does not also become a casualty as well. So going into the water is a bad idea. With that, with the float to live message, also sometimes if you can calm the casualty down, you can have enough just to focus them and get them to swim to the side. If you can get them to focus, occasionally, sometimes they might be able to stand up in the bit of water that they're in if you get them to calm down. So that the action of just asking them to float could be a lifesaver with this one. We'll move on to the Water Safety Scotland Schools presentation. The Water Safety Scotland has just launched a water safety presentation for schools, which is available for people to use on the Water Safety Scotland website and the National Improvement Hub. This resource has various levels which will provide water safety advice for all children throughout their school life and is designed so that it can be presented by all education practitioners, regardless of prior water safety experience. The first of these resources is now live, with the subsequent levels being added throughout the year. This is a great resource and will hopefully assist in a generational change with water safety. And finally, this is the last clip of tonight's presentation. This clip will tell a powerful story from a parent's point of view and hopefully galvanise our need to improve our water safety in Scotland.
Megan was, she was a beautiful girl. She was 20 when she died. And we didn't know what had happened to start with because we just knew she was missing. She was actually missing for nearly 6 weeks. And the river was very high. She'd fallen off some steps straight into the river. It was an accident. Megan fell in unexpectedly. I was standing in my kitchen one morning, ringing the police to say my daughter was missing, and it's just the worst place anyone can be, any parent can be. And I had a call saying a body had been found at Acaster. When we found out for certain that that's what happened, as a mum, I just went over and over and over in my head what she possibly went through. And I still do. I didn't ever get a chance to say goodbye. She just went. So it's something that I've got to carry for the rest of my life, the fact that I've lost my daughter and I'm never going to stop missing her. My lasting memory of her is of her growing up and being very much my friend as well as my daughter. And that's something I miss an awful lot.
It's a beautiful day, and they entered the quarry through a hole in the fence, and they were just chilling out. For whatever reason, Jay decided to go a bit nearer the edge to have a look over, and the edge gave way and he rolled into the water, which was severely cold. His body went into shock, but his friends, they didn't give up hope, and they did their best to get Jay out of the water. They were then taken to hospital, suffering from hypothermia themselves. And our lives changed forever. There's not a day goes by when we don't think of Jay. It was a pleasure to have him as a son.
My first thought that someone had taken him, not for a minute that he would be in the pool.
Jack had obviously gone out of the doors and fell in. We expected if he'd gone into the water, he'd be on the water.
Floating.
Jack was at the bottom. And you don't look at the bottom of the pool, you just look at the top. Just takes those few seconds, turn into minutes, 2 minutes, very quietly, very silently. And suddenly it's all finished. He wasn't lucky, but we were to have had him. And he gave so much and made so many people love him instantly.
The initial impact was just one of shock and horror. When I discovered that it was drowning that had been the cause of death, it was really bizarre because David was petrified of drowning. I just don't like to think about the fact that that's what happened to him, because I just can't imagine what must have been going through his mind. He must have known that we were going to die. I can still recall it like it was yesterday. My mum and dad just being in absolute pieces. Sometimes I can hear a song on the radio and just cry because it just touches upon it. I absolutely just do not want people to have to go through what me and my family have been through. It just has a huge impact on every aspect of your life. He'd want to be remembered for being David Cullen. It just makes me smile when I think about him.
He was bubbly, outgoing, full of life, I think.
It was the first hot day in March. I found out by his friends phoning the house. Corky's gone in the water and he hasn't come back up. We knew he was a strong swimmer. You'd think there's no way you could lose a person in here.
Part of us was hoping that he'd played a prank on his friends and got out somewhere without being seen and gone home. That's not what he'd done. And then eventually they pulled him out.
They tried and there was just nothing they could do about it. He was a lovely lad. You couldn't wish for a better son.
I went out the back door and my heart just sunk, and the dog was sat by the pond. I just knew. And as I got over there was Jack face down in the pond. He was lifeless. There was no breathing, there was nothing. And Jack died that day. I think they worked on him for about an hour and a half. I just remember stroking his feet and shouting, "Fight, Jack, fight." And then someone put their hand on my shoulder and told me that there was nothing more they could do for my son, that he was gone. Losing Jack has affected everybody in his life. I don't want any more children to drown. The way I remember Jack is his beaming smile. He just melted your heart.
He'd obviously had a drink on his way, walking to Hyde Park. For whatever reason, he decided that he wanted to go for a swim. And then he went under the water once, came up. He must have realised that something was happening to his body and shouted out that he didn't think he was going to make it back to the shore. But it was all happened very quickly. When the police officers arrived on that Monday morning, I thought he'd been knocked off his Boris bike. I didn't think he'd drown because he was always a strong swimmer. Well, he was the only son. We both lost our best friend. We've lost a future.
The few times that I've watched that film, many times now, and every time it sort of gets me. It's quite a strong film there to end on. Now I'll stop for any questions. Do you want me to sort of share my screen at this point, Leanne?
Yeah, Barry, thank you. And thank you for that. Some very strong messaging throughout that, and those last two videos in particular kind of gave me the chills for obvious reasons. So yeah, quite kind of emotional watching that. So just as a reminder, in terms of your questions and where you can submit them, if you look at your toolbar where you would normally press mute, if you're ever on a Zoom meeting, there is a button that says Q&A. If you just click on that, then you can add any questions there, and then Catherine can read them out and Barry can read them live. I suppose maybe while we're waiting on anyone submitting a question, Barry, me and you were talking about just before we came on the call, and I think it's probably important to maybe raise this point. At the moment, there's quite a popular TV show on BBC One. I don't know if anybody has watched it, called Freeze the Fear with Wim Hof, who Wim Hof has obviously become quite a bit of a celebrity in the last couple of years because of his breathing techniques and a lot of the stuff that he does in terms of cold water. And I was just saying to Barry that particularly last night's episode, when I was watching it, it kind of gives me the fear a bit that there's going to be some young people thinking that looks pretty cool to do. So Barry, maybe I just wanted to ask like your advice of what parents, like what kind of discussions should parents be having about programmes like that if they're young? Maybe they're sitting at night. I know that maybe my daughter would sit on the couch and watch something like that with me. So then what do we say to our young people after that so that they're not going out and copying that?
I think possibly highlighting the fact that behind the camera that there's a very, very large team of medical experts and divers and people to look after the welfare of these people in there. It will be done in a controlled environment, and there will be the normal disclaimers on the TV show not to try this at home. My advice would be not to try this at home, but certainly there is health benefits of the cold water. Definitely, there is definitely health benefits from it, but it's to enjoy that safely. I think we may see a rise in certain clubs joining up to try and take advantage of this and promote this. But certainly, if you were to be doing it, I would suggest doing it with organised groups. As a bare minimum, I wouldn't be advising anybody to go off of what they've seen on the TV.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. Catherine, I can pass to you. I see there's some questions coming in,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you've maybe got some questions. I know you were quite keen to watch tonight's
yes,
presentation.
I mean, because I am a sea swimmer, I have been sea swimming, so I'm very interested in it. But you know, the care that we take, and you know, not swimming alone. I think the thing that strikes me about a lot of the incidents and what I see locally is that alcohol is featuring heavily with young people, and that's where some of the problems come from. And I think I wanted to ask if the public become aware of, you know, young people drinking near areas of water, you know, like the quarry up at Mugduck, that, you know, that people are travelling to. Should that be a call to 111, or
Yes.
what should people do?
Certainly a call to 111. The fire service and our partners have got quite a robust way of what we have called hotspots, such as Mugdock, that may have this, and we will have engagement plans there. Unfortunately, as you said, in that example, people are travelling from far and wide to try and come to these places. I would definitely advise the 111 call and notifying the police of that, even if it's just to go out and offer some advice. Unfortunately, we can't stop people from going into places with our access codes, but we can always offer advice with what they're doing in there, and especially if it's possibly sort of going into antisocial behaviour and that sort of thing with underage drinking. There is something the police could do to disperse them, but definitely make the call if you see something in there. It's definitely the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I'm hearing anecdotally reports that with the free bus pass, that young people are now beginning to explore more. So they're travelling to other parts of Scotland. So they're going to areas where they don't know the bodies of water. And I think it was, you know, quite striking, those aerial pictures of Loch Lomond, because that is another place that is very easy for people in Glasgow to get to. But when you see, you know, some of those pictures, it's the drop off that's and the much colder water, you know, in places like Loch Lomond that are a feature. Add alcohol and it's just a heady, you know, it's just a disaster waiting to happen.
It certainly is, and we're looking at ways to engage with our young people, whether that be with the British Transport Police and going on to this. Often you are totally correct. The people that stay locally tend to know the risks in their area, and it's people that are travelling from far and wide that maybe not know the risks. That's why it's vitally important, if you are going to partake in these, that you do look at the dangers before you go into the water. You do look to see if there's drop-offs or there's going to be anything in there, rather than just jumping in. Being aware of the cold water as well, and taking your time to get into the waters definitely could be a lifesaver.
Yeah, it's that bit of that sudden, you know, I go into cold water regularly. I would never jump in and get the, you know, it's a gentle entry, and I've been doing it for a while, and, you know, I do it safely and get those health benefits. But I don't think that the vast majority of people who are, you know, are out there there's a lot of jumping in, the tombstoning, you know, the diving straight into it, that's when you get that gasp reflex.
Certainly at Loch Lomond, as we described, cold water being anything below 15 degrees. Loch Lomond's probably currently sitting between 7 and 8 degrees, just to give you an indication of the temperature. It doesn't really warm up massively. And as we said, with the deep water as well, the water temperature, if you're sitting in 3 foot of water, can feel quite comfortable, but as you get more used to it, more comfortable, you can quickly move further into deeper water. And then that's when the long-term effects of cold water, the issues with the muscles, as we saw with Ant Middleton, with the nut and bolt, it took a bit longer for him. And that can present quite a high danger if you've been in the water for a while and start getting cold and you're in deeper water. You might not be able to put your feet back down and might struggle to get back out.
Yeah. Okay, I'll move on from my questions because I could discuss it all night, and I'll move to some of what's on the chat because we've got a few on there now. So the first one was just a thank you, to say, not a question, just to say thanks for a really interesting and useful presentation. And I would agree that people on this will be in total agreement. I thought it was a great presentation, and it just really engaged me, and I think it engaged the audience too. We then had Lorna saying, would it be possible to get a copy of the slides to feed back to staff and families within the school? This is being recorded. I will be sharing it with schools, as I normally do. Leanne will be sharing on her social media. So there's lots of places that this will go out there, and people will be able to use it because it was such a good presentation. So that's easily answering that one.
Yeah, just add that normally in the YouTube, Lorna, once we've created the YouTube and we've added the video to our YouTube, we will put an actual link to the presentation itself, because sometimes it's useful for you to have that. If there's any particular slides, I'm thinking probably some of those photos as well of Loch Lomond and the embedded links to the videos. So once you get the link to the YouTube video, see if you just look at the description in YouTube, that's where I normally put any links to the presentation and links to other videos or websites or anything like that. So I'll maybe ask Barry if he wants to share some useful websites with further advice, and we can make sure that we embed it all in that YouTube description when it comes out to you.
Yeah, that would be no problem.
That's great. So we now have a question about, do schools routinely give water safety talks as part of health and wellbeing education? And I don't know whether you know that. I don't know the answer to that, but I could find out. So I'm hoping that you do, Barry.
It is the resource that's just been released will mean that it is getting taught in the schools more than it has been. I think to say I don't fully know, but I think it's been inconsistent to say the least, the safety advice that the schools have had regarding water safety. But the new resource, which is available on the Water Safety Scotland website, it's quite a comprehensive resource that's in there, and will cover all the topics that we've covered in this, and it's aged right through from the early years right through to when our young people leave school.
Okay, that's great. Trickier question, the next one, but again, it's probably not tricky for you. If you're struggling in water, should you try to remove outer clothing, or do clothes help you to float? Again,
it would depend on the clothes. If it's stopping you from being able to float, I would definitely recommend, if you're wearing big boots for talk's sake and you feel they're pulling you down, definitely would be try to remove them. But the advice would always be to float and to try and float with it. I think try to remove clothes would be quite difficult if you're in that panicked state with it. But certainly if you're wearing big boots or anything that's hindering you from being able to float, if you can get them off. But again, it's remaining calm and floating. So our message would still be the float to live message.
So I don't see any other questions, Barry. So all I want to say is thank you very much for giving up your time tonight and putting that presentation together for us. Like I've said, I hope it does actually save somebody's life or gives them that additional knowledge to help them in an emergency situation like that. And as always, Catherine, thank you very much for helping us with the questions.